Why, hi there. It's me, Uncle Ron. And we're going to do our last of our videos on my first impressions of Classic Formula One, Classic F1. Anthony's great game that you can buy on either a print version or a download PDF version on asggames.com. In fact, I'll probably throw a link into this one so where you can get it. So I'm going to. I ran a full race and did pit stops. I think that's where I was when the last one of these I did went up. Was just before the pit stops, and so I'm gonna go through all three of my screens with this. Tell you what I like about it. Tell you what I didn't really understand about it, and at the end, just a few things that I would suggest as a new person doing it. But overall, I really truly enjoyed the game. So let's get right to it, shall we? No, I don't want to keep checking at the beginning of the sheet. This, I felt, was the coolest part of the game. The setup. We showed you in the last video the Ayrton setup card and how you get the rolls and how you put together the setup sheet. The number one thing I think in this game as far as replayability is concerned is that for every driver, you have access to every car they drove in their Formula One career. Now, I went out earlier today and grabbed a couple new sets for just trying to think of a project I might want to do with all this stuff. And there, even if they just drove one car for 1 year, it's there. If you want to do a season replay for a lot of seasons, I think you can do it. You certainly have most of the scores for that. I'm not sure. I know he's got 76 in 2019 comes with the game when you purchase it. So, but the setup sheet here is great. So you roll the 2d10 and you get the car, and so you get a constructor's rating, a car rating, a driver's rating, which is right on the card. Depending on what track you're running at, it could be a generic rating, it could be a speed rating, or it could be a tactics rating. The track that you're at determines which of those you use. So you add them up, you divide it by 3, you get a base. The base is there. It tells you how the drivers will perform in the rain. The lower the number, let's say in Schumacher's line there in line 4. Oh no, I took the numbers off the screen. For the second driver, his base won't change in the rain. Someone like Alain Prost, not a good rain driver, he gets a 4 rating, and that's not good. Red line ratings, for those who are really aggressive, you get that. You can take ratings off. The ratings have to do with how many quote-unquote spaces you move in a given lap. We'll get to that in a minute. Team play and how to figure out for pole, how many pit stops in qualifying. It just is. I'm sure the second time I do this will be a heck of a lot easier to do. It was fun. I'm just going to say it was fun, and probably I will take some time in the next few days to build another spreadsheet to put most of that information as far as the ratings are concerned there. So all I have to do is just roll for the car numbers to go from there. Again, an elegant system, lots and lots of drivers. If your favorite driver was like Michael Andretti, who I'd forgotten had driven Formula One, his 13 race career is on the card of the best drivers of the 90s. It's great. Qualifying, I'm not going to show any of the charts with this. Qualifying is extremely easy. It is 2d10, and they're and the chart with a table. You cross-reference on the left the number for a roll on a 2d10. And so let's say in Fangio's case, that number for his first time came as a 4. You re-roll the 2d10, and then you get the 0.2 of a 10, the decimal after. Fangio did not have the pole after day 1. It was going to be Kimi Räikkönen, I think, as I'm looking here. With his time of 2:13, and Fangio blew him away. That is not dependent on the track. Weather does play a factor for that. Not quite sure how. Obviously, you can slow things down. You can get into practice lap accidents, and qualifying accidents as well. The XUC for Brabham was, look, he had a qualifying rating of a 9. I think the worst you can have is a 12, 1 being the best, 12 being the worst. He must have had a great roll for his first time, and so he wasn't even pulling the car out on the course for number 2, just because he wasn't going to. I don't think he could do any better. Again, you can qualify the old-fashioned way, which is just 2 days of qualifying, best time wins. You can do today's version of qualifying, which is in a 20 grid field. You, after the first day, you knock out the lowest 10. In qualifying session number 2, you knock out cars 6 through 10, and then for the third qualifying session, you just roll 1 through 5, and that's your order. Technically, you could go with as many cars as you feasible on a grid. If you wanted to, there were some races that had as many as 24. 20, I think, has been the standard for a while, and that's what I did for a race. And because you need a random number generator for as we get to the race part of things, that's probably the easiest way to do. There's 20 cars in the 2019 set if you buy the game, and there's 33 cars if you that come with the champion set, which I got with the game. You could do all 33. It'd be very intriguing to do. It would take a while to do. In fact, I'm still trying to figure out how the best way to do a project is. But qualifying was straightforward. If you've never watched Formula One qualifying, there are not one car at a time on the track. They're all pretty much going out together over the course of a session. And it worked. In pole position, and just like the arcade game back in the 80s, pole position in Formula One is huge. As you'll see when I show you the final results of this race, you can just kind of take off and run and hide as long as you don't have any problems, or as there's no drivers that are faster than you behind you, which is what happened to Mr. Fangio in a race here at Monza. You get a certain amount of spaces per your base number. And the base number and driver number, so what you would see as base and driver. Base is what you calculated within the game, so that would be the constructor rating and the car rating and the driver rating divided by 3, rounded up or down depending on a tie-breaking roll. The driver number you see after space is an M. The driver number is what they're, again, those are lower on the driver's card, and it would be for speed, neutral, or tactics. And so I added that column there so I could figure out how many places to move, because we'll get to how the race that goes in a minute. That the base space column, which you see almost all the way over on the right, was a reminder to me of just how many spaces a driver got on a lap roll. You roll for a lap, you resolve whatever, we'll get to how that works in a second. You resolve the random driver action, and then everyone else moves accordingly. So it was telling me that the base number for Fangio for every lap was 20 spaces. Again, there's no track here to go back and forth. It's kind of, you keep track of it in the spaces column, and for every 150 spaces there, it's considered a lap. So Fangio pretty much would have lapped anybody. Well, there was 1, 2, 3, 6 cars that were considered lapped. So the top first 14, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 cars finished on the lead lap. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 were still running, and wow. Okay, well, you know how that goes. Hold on one sec. Okay, this is about as big as I can make the track page to see. Every track has is a 2-page card essentially, and I'm not showing you the X chart for Monza, but this is how you run the race. You set up. Well, actually, I could put up the dice for you. All right, so I got my ball roller up here. I have a 6-sided die, which tells me what my passing chances are. The 2d10. And when I roll the dice here in a sec, I'm going to read the red one on the left for the top part of the screen that goes from 0 to 1. The blue die on the bottom is a 20-sided die, and those have to do with random drivers. And so when you get to a turn, let's just say I roll the dice. So the first one I look at is that red 0. And it tells me there's an accident chance. Okay? For random driver number 20 in the field, if that makes any sense. So I'd ignore the top on the 3 because we're not going to have any passing on an accident chance. I would then look at, oops, be helpful if I didn't move that. Would you open up? Okay. Move this over here. Turns out that number 20 in this race was Ascari, who actually died at Monza and rolled an accident check. So I would pull out his card, roll the dice again, the 2d10, and then it would tell me if he was in an accident and what type of accident that was. Now, on the 0 roll, you see in the black on the right there, it says 2 ACC. That has nothing to do with Duke or North Carolina. That is that 2 drivers have an accident check. So if, let's say, Ascari did get an accident, I would also just do another random roll to see if anyone else had an accident check, I think. And so driver number 18, which would be Jeff Brabham, who had a mechanical issue in lap 23 of my race, I would check his card with that fresh 2d10 roll to see if he got in an accident as well. And that's pretty much how the laps go. You see on a 0 up top, 10 move for all. So instead of getting the base roll for that one lap, everybody moves 10 squares. That's not in an accident. Okay, look, I'll roll one more thing. So now I'm looking at a 1. Now that counts as the fastest lap, and I didn't do this right in the race. So I would look for driver 15, and driver 15 for me again would have been, oh, don't look at the pit result, Ron. It would have been Michael Schumacher. So Schumacher's base rating in the race was 19 spaces. There's another check you pass. I didn't do it for this one. If you got the fast lap, he got the boost. So I would have turned those 19 base spaces for Schumacher into 25 base spaces for those 2 laps, because that fastest lap, it counts as 2 laps. So I would have moved him 50 spaces. And in my view, just to simplify things, he would have been able to pass anybody in those 2 laps that he was within reach of. So let's say Jackie Stewart in that 7:06. He hits the fastest lap. He goes from a 16 to a 25. Now, everyone else moves their base spaces for that. So it wasn't like he could be at 7:56 and pass the 2 other cars. But he probably would have gotten past Sebastian Vettel. Yeah, he would have. He would have gotten past Sebastian Vettel, and I would have automatically passed him because he had it. Once you run out of laps, the race is over. Pit window here, and I'll show you on there. I made sure it was only 1 pit stop. So between 21 and 24, and I think I did this wrong too. So for the pit stops, what I did is the first time that someone got into pit range, we just brought everybody in, and you roll individually. You look at pit roll, and that's a D20 roll. We'll roll now 1. Did anyone get a 1? No. That would have been a 6-second stop. So let's take a look at Alonso's number there. So instead of that being 6.5 and 13, that would have been 6 and 12. Okay, so that's pretty quick. So there are 4 pit laps. And so you add up the 3 non-laps, everybody gets 10. So they move 30 spaces. Now, on a 13, his base is a 17. So he actually would have only, on that 4th, it's kind of confusing. So you take that, you subtract 13 for 4. So for the pit window, he would have moved 34 squares. I wrote 24, but that's because that's how I did it. But it should have been 34. And then you take that result, add it to the number of spaces they are, and then you resort after everything. I know that's confusing. At some point, we'll do a race, but I'm just trying to give a first impression. Random number, I rolled those out by hand. It's random. Anyway, to finish the thought with the pit, I thought it was very good. Just gave a bunch of excitement in the middle of the race. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. All the retirements we had in the race came after the pits. And in fact, I think the Schumacher-Brabham things were Jeff Brabham's car died in the pits, and Schumacher, I think, spun coming out of the pits. I liked how the pit thing worked. You can, just like in a NASCAR race or any other race, gain or lose positions depending on what your pit crew does. Some of the pit charts has to do with your constructor rating, which is in the setup, so you already had that written down. The better the constructor, the better your team is, the faster your pit thing's going to be, and the faster you can get out. And for some of these drivers, they were pretty much nose to tail, especially I think for most of the race. If you look from Alonso were at 6 to Raikkonen at 9, those 4 were pretty much neck and neck in the entire race. 1 or 2 squares may just be enough to get a position. And remember, Formula 1 is all about points. The better you do, the more points you're going to get. So I liked how that worked. The random number thing, we'll click on it here. That's how I knew what driver to check when I roll the dice like this. So I would know that I'm looking at car number 15. I'm looking at Monza thing 2. And then once I resolve that, then I can roll again for the D10. But it reminded me a lot of, I know I've said this before, Red, White, and Blue Racing from Play.com. Everyone, of course, gets to move, and of course you're moving them over a hypothetical track, but it just makes sure that you're not doing everything for everybody all the time, if that makes any sense. So only one driver is in peril or prosperity, risk reward, per lap. And then up top was the lap, so I knew what the weather was, sunny and dry. A roll of a 00, by the way, you roll again to see if the weather changes. It can change over the course of a race. And that lap counter just told me what lap I was on and how many laps the race was. 10% rule I didn't use. I think it was kind of confusing. The 10% rule that you see in the middle column there between moved and pit roll would be if you had a slower driver make the top 10. So there comes a decision within after 10% of the race, in Monza's case, about 5 laps, whether they would keep their current pace in the race or revert back to where they were before. I only had one driver have a car bad enough to have less than 10 base moves, and that was Graham Hill, and he didn't qualify in the top 10, so I pretty much ignored it. Fangio won by 37 spaces. There's a way to translate that into time if you so wish. Nigel Mansell moved up 3 spots from 5th to 2nd. The big droppers were Jeff Brabham, who had the mechanical issue, Schumacher, who crashed, Ascari wasn't doing all that great before he spun out, or his accident on lap 27. Uh, Ayrton Senna got aggressive, trying to pass Alain Prost in lap 31. That was a cool rule because on a passing thing, you either you either make the pass, you don't make the pass, or there's a possible incident, and then you roll 2d10 again for a possible incident. And I think in Senna's case, he was just too aggressive and clipped Prost. Prost was able to stay in the race. He passed his accident check. Senna did not, and so Senna crashed out. Clark, late in the race, they were kind of on the same square, and so I was aggressive and trying to get Clark past Mansell, and the possible incident came up, and the car with a lower rating survived. Little ding, but it didn't tell me to remove the base rating at all, while the other one spun out and crashed. And so that's how you had the accident. So we retired. So 15 cars finished, and so Fangio, who was Italian and drove his 1956 car, which was pretty gosh darn good, the Ferrari, won at Monza. So that's pretty much how the race went. I know I did not explain very well how the racing part goes, but it's interesting because you just sort after all the spaces, and then you can get a sense of, when you're one or two spaces apart. I'll show you the track chart again. You can technically, if you get in to some of those rules, I think that's the numbers on the color coding on the left is, look, if that top die there where you see the 2 all rolling and it's a 3, if it was a 1 or a 2, you could pass if there was 1 space or more, 2 spaces or more, even 3 spaces or more, depending if you had a green number on the left there. So and so you roll off another chart for that. A 4 or 6, there's no passing chance. And that's actually what there is a lot of in Formula One. You don't want to damage those cars. So you might have, in the end here, I think everyone was pretty much separated. But let's say Piquet through Hamilton on this screen here, all within 4 or 5 squares of each other. You're trying to be patient. You don't want to get too aggressive, or you could lose your car. But at some point, you just... discretion is a better part of valor there. So let's see. So what did I like about the game? Oh, that button. I think for a racing game, which is real tough, it played very well. The rules that I chose to use, I thought I had down there. I used aggressive versus aggressive for passing. There are different grades of passing, and different grades of aggression, and different grades of defending. And so I really just wanted to simplify that. Again, we'll get to that in a second. Lots of charts, and once you understand how the charts work, it does add a lot of color to the race. I could imagine in my mind's eye all these cars on the track racing. I can't say that it was Monza that I saw, but we only had a couple rolls that actually were on the X chart from the Monza card, which may be that. And again, I don't watch a ton of Formula One racing. I chose Monza because I knew it was a speedy track. Certainly the results were believable, which was important when you do that. It was fun. I enjoyed it. You might want to have a calculator along with you, because sometimes you're adding up as many as 4 laps worth of stuff, or when you get into some high numbers. I think Fangio's winning total of scores was 852. So when you have like 752 plus 8 or 19 or whatever, you just got to slow down and do the math in your head. Beginning part of the race, I forgot to check to see what the base bases were, if they were kind of all on the same square. So cars that could have dropped back, I didn't catch that in time. Mechanical checks are real easy. You'll all have a mechanical number. It ranges from 0 to 20. I think if you roll a 3 on this particular track to see which driver, there are 2 mechanical rolls. That's as simple. You're rolling against a D20. If it passes the check, you stay in the race. If not, you go out. These things are pretty fragile cars. There was only one mechanical failure, but of the 5 cars that didn't make it, 3 had a mechanical rating of over 10, and Damon Hill somehow survived with an 11. So there's a sense of risk and reward on each roll, which there should be with Formula One. There were quite a few rules that I didn't take on. I didn't go through with hot constructor or good constructor or bad constructor. I really didn't look to see about what was a good year, what was a bad year, which is all in the cards. I really wish that there was kind of like a basic advanced and super advanced version of the game. He does have some of that for the car selection. You can just roll a d6 and pick the car from the year, that comes up on the roll. I wish passing was simplified. I know I kind of alluded to that a couple times in the video. I wasn't quite sure on the laps that you could not pass. I did not try to pass, but I wasn't real clear on when I should pass. You're only supposed to have 3 passing attempts per lap segment or lap, and I just used my best judgment. If you were on the same square, I thought about doing it. And so, because you might think you're in the slipstream or the draft and have a run and you roll, and if you get not, then you just kind of tuck back in. Because if you can clear some of these, and some of these you might get 3 squares additional per lap, that's a lot. You can get some space and catch up to other drivers in a big hurry. I wish that had been simplified a bit. And in fact, I probably will keep it simplified for whatever my next race is. What else? Again, I'll pick another track that I know reasonably well and see if I can get that track impression. Again, that's not the game designer's fault. You are not. It's not like Formula DE, if you're familiar with that, where you just take the driver along, or like the Thoroughbred racing game, where you just take your miniature and run them along something that is a model of either Monaco or Saratoga, depending on which game engine you're doing. So that was in the mind's eye, but it did give me I did have a good sense of how far apart the cars were. Fangio never had a mechanical check. His mechanical number was 4. Never had an accident check. Don't know what his accident rating is. I'd have to look it up on the card. So once he got out, because he had this, there were 4 drivers that had a base space rating of 20. Now they can change the driver's base rating throughout the race depending on if you hit next rating or not. I would say that it's not a rare play chart, but it's not super common either. So someone could have run faster than Fangio, but he was the fastest car in qualifying. It made sense that he was the fastest car there, and so the race result I was fine with. There wasn't anything I felt disappointed with. I wish that some of the rolls were 2-lap rolls. You could have as many as 53 rolls for a race, and again, the longest part after you resolve whatever the individual driver is just making sure you count the spaces right and make sure that you're not passing cars when you shouldn't be, which again is part of a Formula One race. So my suggestions to Anthony would be a basic way to run a race. I thought the directions were, for the most part, well done, but maybe a 1 or 2 page. This is how you set up for a race. This is how you run the race. Maybe a referral of what pages you should look on for the charts in the PDF. Have rules in one part, drivers, and then your track charts, and then your race charts. So you wouldn't have to go back. There's a lot of going back and forth across the PDF, which is fine because it was my first race. But just to kind of simplify that, I think would be good. And then you can add, he's got something here. You will even if you took the same 20 drivers and ran them on the same track, you will never have the same field of 20 cars, and I think that just gives it infinite replayability. Time-wise, I didn't feel like it took too long. I did the race over 3 or 4 sessions. I think the next time I will probably do setup and qualifying at one time and then see how much of that race I can run. For me, running to the pit stop seemed to work, and the second half of the race kind of went through there. And again, if you're familiar with Formula One racing, it's different from NASCAR and IndyCar. Those cars do get stretched out. It is possible by the 10th lap of the race to know who has won the race, and so it becomes a battle for points. And so I thought that was I thought that was good. So again, I think you have to be a real fan of auto racing. This is not a beer and pretzel sim. This is something that I think if you actually sat down and did the setup and went through the qualifying and then all the race through, it probably would be about 3 hours from start to finish. But you get the full sensation of getting to know all the drivers and who's going to have a good week and who's going to have a bad week. And again, the racing itself was well, and I think there wasn't anything there that I got stuck on. If there was one area that I think that could be simplified for beginning players of the game, it would be to explain how passing works better in a generic passing chart. And if you want to go through for the advanced or the super advanced and have aggressive and super aggressive and par, I think was an average, then you could do that. But just to get a feel of how to go through, because for a lot of us, it's helpful if you touch the screen every once in a while. For a lot of us, I think that would be realistic enough. Anthony has a game that I'm sure, because I played his soccer game and I love time travel tennis as well, can be super realistic. And he's taking what is for a lot of a what-if situation, especially because cars are different years and different eras, and giving it an awful lot. You could tell that there was an awful lot of love to make this game, and it really is a winner. I think some basic gameplay in the directions, and maybe some of the stuff is optional later on, such as the passing rules and such like that, would make it more accessible for people, but well worth the money I put into it. This is something, because it's PDF, it's not a computer program, it's not going to get outdated. This is all basic stuff I set up in Excel. Lefty Dad 1 with a great tutorial. There's a few great tutorials over on the Racing Page group over on Delphi, the Delphi boards. Certainly help with that, and when I figure out how I want to set up my permanent sheet for this, I might share that with the community. So with Lefty Dad 1's help, I was able to get to different stages of the game and not get lost, because this is an involved game, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It is very, very good. It's an excellent game. You just got to take things one chunk at a time, and once you get the hang of it, I think it'll get quicker. With all that, I'm Ron Chuckett. Thank you so much for watching. I'll put a link to the game in the description, and if you want to buy it, let them know after that that you watch my video. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.